I'm pregnant with your... Lauren whispered, her breath warm against my ear, and I didn't move an inch. Not because I couldn't, but because in that split second I understood exactly what she wanted. A scene. A gasp. A broken glass. A headline at the table that would paint me as the bitter old mother-in-law. So I kept my hands folded in my lap, my wedding ring turned inward the way I do when I'm thinking, and I stared at my plate like the mashed potatoes held the answer. The dining room was bright in that soft, suburban way, recessed lights, a little centerpiece of grocery store carnations, Ethan's family plates brought out for Sunday dinners. Roast chicken sat steaming in the middle of the table, the skin brown just right, the kind of meal that's supposed to make everyone feel safe. I could hear the gentle clink of forks, the low hum of the dishwasher in the next room, and Ethan laughing at something he'd already told twice. Across from me, Lauren smiled with her lips only, the kind of smile you give when you've already won and you're waiting for the other person to realize it. Her hand rested near her water glass, fingers tapping once, twice, impatient, like she was counting down to my reaction. My son didn't see it. Ethan never sees the tiny things first. He sees the big gestures, the "I made your favorite dessert," the "I booked the reservation," the "I'm just trying to keep the peace." He'd invited me tonight like it was a fresh start. "Mom, just come. It'll be nice," he'd said on the phone. He sounded tired, and I told myself I could do tired. I could do polite. I could sit at their table and pretend we were still the kind of family where words meant what they said. Lauren leaned in again as she reached past me for the salad bowl, her bracelet sliding down her wrist with a soft chime. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she murmured, quiet enough that only I could hear. Then she straightened, bright as a hostess, and said out loud, "Maggie, do you want more gravy?" As if she hadn't just dropped a match in the middle of my life. I looked up at her, slow and calm, and I let my eyes hold hers for one steady beat. In my head, I replayed the whisper. "I'm pregnant with your what, Lauren? Your son? Your last name? Your money? Your signature?" My stomach tightened, but my face stayed pleasant. Practice from decades of smiling through discomfort. I picked up my water glass and took a small sip, careful not to spill a single drop. "Yes," I said softly, setting the glass down. "A little more gravy would be lovely." And while Ethan reached for the boat, still laughing, I made myself a promise I'd never needed before. I would not give Lauren the reaction she was buying. I would give her something else entirely: time, attention, and the kind of quiet certainty that turns traps into confessions. I kept my smile in place until the plates were cleared and the conversation thinned into that familiar end of a dinner, where people talk about nothing because the important thing is sitting in the room like smoke. Ethan carried the chicken platter to the sink, humming like a man who believed a clean kitchen could mean a clean life. Lauren stood at the counter, rinsing glasses with careful, delicate movements, as if she was performing helpful wife, for an audience that no longer existed. I offered to help because that is what I have done my whole life when tension rises, but Lauren lifted her hand without looking at me and said, "We have it," in the same tone someone uses to close a door softly but firmly. So I collected my purse and stepped toward the hallway, letting them think I was ready to leave without questions, without trouble, without any inconvenient need for truth. My coat hung on the rack by the front door, and for a moment I just stood there listening. The dishwasher hummed. Water ran. Ethan laughed at something Lauren said, and the sound was too easy, too practiced. I thought about the way Lauren had whispered against my ear, the way she had left the sentence hanging, like a hook in the dark. People like her do not leave blanks by accident. Blanks are where fear lives. Blanks are where you fill in the worst possible word, and then blame yourself for hearing it. I slipped my phone from my purse, the screen glowing in my palm, and I opened my notes like I was checking a grocery list. Instead, I wrote down exactly what she had said, word for word, including the pause. Then I wrote down the second thing. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. I did not trust my memory when adrenaline was involved. I trusted ink even if it was digital. When Ethan reappeared, drying his hands on a dish towel, he looked relieved to see me waiting by the door. "Mom, you okay? You got quiet," he said, the concern on his face sincere enough to sting. I softened my voice because I was not here to punish him. "I am fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired," I said, and I reached up to smooth the collar of his shirt the way I used to when he was a boy, the way a mother does when she is trying to fix what she cannot name. Lauren drifted into the doorway behind him, leaning one shoulder against the frame, watching me like I was a puzzle she enjoyed solving. "Long day for everyone," she said, sweet as iced tea. "We are all adjusting." Adjusting to what, I wondered? To her rules? To her story? To whatever she was building with that unfinished sentence. I stepped outside into the cool night air and breathed in slow and steady. The porch light cast a clean circle on the concrete, and the street beyond was quiet, the kind of neighborhood where you can hear a dog tag jingle from 2 houses away. In my car, before I started the engine, I called my best friend Diane and let it ring once, twice, then I hung up before she could answer. I did not want to talk yet. I wanted to think. I drove home with both hands on the wheel, the radio off, my mind replaying Lauren's whisper like a song you cannot stop hearing. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the promise I made at their table had sharpened into a plan. I was done reacting. I was going to start collecting. Sleep did not come easily that night, not because I was afraid of Lauren, but because my mind kept trying to solve the same riddle from every angle. I made chamomile tea and sat at my kitchen table under the small light over the sink, the one my late husband used to call my late-night courtroom. Outside, the porch light across the street blinked on and off as a neighbor came home, and the ordinary sounds of a quiet suburb made Lauren's words feel even more unreal. I opened my notebook again and rewrote the whisper in neat, slow letters, like I could pin it to the page and keep it from crawling into my dreams. "I am pregnant with your..." Then the second line. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be." I said them out loud once, softly, to hear how they sounded in my own kitchen, in my own air. They sounded less like a confession and more like a threat wrapped in perfume. I had raised a son. I knew what real fear sounded like. Lauren did not sound afraid. Lauren sounded confident. That was my first clue. My second clue was the pause. If she meant Ethan, she would have said Ethan. She would have said my son. She would have said it plainly and let the room explode. Instead, she left it blank because blanks make people guess and guessing makes people messy. And messy people sign things without reading. I pulled a folder from the cabinet above my refrigerator, the one labeled estate in black marker. Inside were the papers I had not touched in months. My will, the power of attorney forms, beneficiary statements from an old life insurance policy, the deed to the house I still lived in alone. I spread them out carefully, smoothing corners, making piles, the way I used to when Ethan was small and I had to sort permission slips and report cards. I was not panicking. I was auditing. I turned on my reading glasses and scanned each page for the places where a signature mattered, where a date mattered, where one careless pen stroke could shift a lifetime. I did not find a smoking gun, not yet, but I did find something that made my chest tighten. A sticky note on the inside of the folder, in handwriting that was not mine. It was neat, feminine, and it said, "Ask about updating beneficiaries." I stared at it until my eyes burned. Lauren had been in my kitchen before. She had smiled at me over coffee, offered to carry groceries, asked sweet questions about my plans. I remembered it now, the way she had insisted on helping me organize, the way she had hovered when I signed a check for a church fundraiser. At the time I thought she was trying. Now I could see she was studying. I set the sticky note aside like evidence. Me after my husband passed. I did not accuse anyone. I did not sound dramatic. I simply said, "I would like to schedule a review of my documents this week. I want to confirm that nothing has been modified without my consent." The receptionist offered 2 days later and I took it. My third call was to Diane, because I needed a witness in my life who knew me before this story tried to rewrite me. Diane answered on the second ring, cheerful and blunt as always. "Maggie, you called and hung up last night. What is going on?" I told her only the facts. The whisper, the second whisper, the feeling at the table. Diane went quiet in a way that made my skin prickle. "That is not a joke," she said finally. "That is a setup." "I know," I replied, and hearing someone else say it made me feel steadier, like the floor under my feet had stopped shifting. After breakfast, I pulled up the message thread with Lauren again. But this time I did not read it like a mother hoping for kindness. I read it like an accountant. Every time she had mentioned updating paperwork, I highlighted it in my mind. Every time she had offered to help, I noted the timing. Then I opened my email and searched for keywords. Beneficiary, power of attorney, estate, notary. There it was, an email from 6 months ago with the subject line, Quick question. Lauren had asked if I had ever considered streamlining my documents so Ethan would not be burdened later. Burdened. That word sat in my chest like a pebble in a shoe. I forwarded the email to myself and printed it, because screenshots disappear but paper stays. When my printer word and the page slid out warm, I felt something click into place. I am pregnant with your. Was not meant to point to Ethan's body or to scandal. It was meant to point to my life, my name, my signature. She had not wanted a baby at that table. She had wanted leverage. And for the first time since Sunday dinner I smiled for real because leverage works both ways when you stop being afraid of the blank. 2 days can feel like nothing when you are young, but when you are 67 and someone is trying to write your life in pencil 2 days is plenty of time to sharpen ink. I spent those hours doing ordinary things with extraordinary attention. I watered my porch plants, I folded laundry, I went to the grocery store for apples and butter, and all the while I watched for Lauren's next move like I was listening for a second knock at the door. It came on Wednesday afternoon wrapped in sugar. My phone buzzed with her name, and for a moment I just stared at it, letting it ring once before I answered, because I wanted her to feel that I was not waiting by the phone. "Hi Maggie," she said brightly, as if we were women who shared recipes instead of tension. "I was thinking about you. How are you feeling?" "I am doing well," I said, warm but careful. "How are you?" She gave a small laugh. "Oh, busy. Life is moving fast. Ethan and I are trying to plan ahead. We just want everything to be smooth." Smooth. There it was again, that same theme, do not make this harder than it needs to be. She continued, voice softening into concern. "I know paperwork can be overwhelming. There are so many forms and legal words. Ethan worries you handle too much alone. I found this service that helps seniors organize everything. They can even send a notary to your home, so you do not have to drive. Would that not be a relief? A notary to my home. My signature without witnesses I chose. My hand on a pen while she stood nearby, smiling. I felt my pulse steady instead of spike, because when you finally understand a person's plan, fear turns into clarity. That is thoughtful, I said. What is the name of the service? Lauren hesitated just a fraction, then said it. I repeated it back, pretending to type it into my phone, and I let my tone stay appreciative. Thank you for looking out for me, I added, because flattery makes manipulative people careless. Of course, she said, pleased. We are family. When I hung up, I wrote down the exact time of the call, the company name, and the phrase she used, send a notary. Then I called Diane and told her, and Diane made the same sound she used when she used to watch crime shows with me, that low, disgusted hum. She is trying to get you alone with a pen, Diane said. I know, I replied. And now I know what blank she wants to fill. Later that evening, Ethan texted me a photo of a golden brown apple pie in a glass dish. Lauren says you inspired her, he wrote. I stared at the message until I could feel the tenderness and the anger existing in the same place inside me, like two hands pulling on one rope. I did not blame Ethan for loving his wife. I blamed Lauren for using his love as a tool. I replied with a simple heart emoji and, looks delicious. Then I opened my calendar and circled my appointment with the attorney in red. If Lauren wanted my signature, she was going to have to earn it in a room where truth had witnesses. Thursday morning, I drove to my attorney's office with my hands steady on the wheel, and my estate folder buckled into the passenger seat like a quiet passenger who refused to be ignored. The sky was the kind of pale blue that makes everything look calmer than it is, and for a moment I almost laughed at how normal my day looked from the outside. I parked, checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror out of habit, and walked in holding my papers close. The receptionist greeted me by name, which always makes me feel anchored, like the world still recognizes who I am beyond someone's daughter-in-law drama. In the conference room, Mr. Holloway laid out my documents in clean stacks and asked me gentle, practical questions. Has anyone asked you to sign anything recently, Mrs. Carter? Any new powers of attorney? Beneficiary forms? Property transfers? I told him about the call, the notary suggestion, the way Lauren kept using words like smooth and streamlined, and I handed him the printed email and the sticky note. He did not react with shock. He reacted with focus. This is exactly how people try to create pressure, he said. They frame it as help, then they isolate you, then they rush you. He asked me to confirm out loud who I wanted making decisions if I ever could not. My answer was simple. No one gets to decide my life for me just because they are impatient, I said. We reviewed each document line by line, and he added safeguards, specific instructions a requirement for independent witnesses, and a note that no changes would be accepted without an in-person verification. When I left, I felt lighter not because the problem was solved, but because the ground under my feet was now solid and legal. On my way home, Ethan called. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice hesitant like he was testing the temperature of a room. "Lauren said you seem stressed lately. She is worried. Are you okay?" There it was, the next step of the plan. Use my calm as proof that I was hiding something, use my age as a reason to step in. "I am okay," I said. "I had an appointment to review some paperwork." "That is all." "Paperwork," Ethan repeated, and I could hear Lauren in the background, the faint murmur of her voice guiding his questions. I kept mine gentle. "It is normal to keep things updated," I added, borrowing her own language without giving her control of it. That night, Lauren struck again, but she did it through a performance meant for Ethan, not me. He called after dinner, voice tense. "Mom, Lauren says she is not feeling great. She says stress is bad right now," he said, and the words landed like stones placed carefully on a scale. Right now. Stress is bad. A soft warning disguised as concern. "I am sorry she feels unwell," I replied. "Tell her to take care of herself." Ethan exhaled. "She thinks we should all meet this weekend just to talk things through. Like a family. No drama. Just clarity." Clarity. Another word for control. I paused just long enough to sound thoughtful. "That might be nice," I said. "A calm conversation can help." I could almost picture Lauren's satisfied smile when she heard that. She thought she was inviting me into her trap. What she did not know was that I had just decided the location of the trap, and I was bringing my own witnesses. By Friday afternoon, the weather had turned mild, the kind of early spring day that makes people believe everything can be fixed with sunshine and a clean tablecloth. I let Ethan think he was the one arranging peace because it was easier for him to accept, but I was the one setting the stage. I texted him first, simple and sweet. "How about we meet at my house tomorrow at 11 in the morning? We'll make coffee and set out pastries." He replied within minutes, relieved. "That sounds great, Mom. Thank you." Then Lauren texted right after, as if she could not help herself. "Perfect. We can finally get everything sorted." Sorted. Like my life was a drawer she wanted to reorganize. I spent that evening preparing in a way I had not prepared for company in years. I vacuumed not because my house was dirty but because order calms me. I set my dining table with my good placemats and simple white plates. Nothing fancy, just clean and respectable. I placed a small vase of tulips in the center, bright enough to look welcoming but not so dramatic it felt like a performance. Then I made the calls that mattered. Diane agreed to come early, not as an aggressor, but as a friend who could sit quietly in the living room and hear what was said. "I will be your backup battery," she told me. "If you start to doubt yourself, I will remind you who you are." I also called Mr. Holloway's office, and although he could not attend a weekend meeting, he gave me one sentence that felt like armor. "Do not sign anything under social pressure, and do not discuss specifics unless it is in writing." I wrote that sentence on an index card and slid it under my place setting like a secret I could touch. Saturday morning I woke up early and baked cinnamon rolls from a recipe Ethan loved as a kid. The smell filled my house, warm and comforting, and I hated that Lauren would try to use comfort as a weapon. Still, I let the sweetness exist because sweetness does not belong to her. At 10:45, Diane arrived with a paper bag of bagels and a look that said she was ready to keep her mouth shut until it mattered. I poured coffee, set out orange juice, and made sure my folder of documents was on the sideboard. Not hidden, not shoved in a drawer, but present. At exactly 11, a car door shut outside. Then another, and my stomach tightened in a familiar way. I opened the front door before they could knock, because I was done letting anyone control the tempo of my own home. Ethan stood on my porch holding a box of pastries like an offering, and Lauren stood beside him in a soft sweater, one hand resting lightly on her lower stomach as if it was already a symbol. Her smile was gentle, practiced, and her eyes scanned past me into my house, checking for surprises. I stepped aside and welcomed them in. "Come in," I said, calm and warm. "Let us talk." And as Lauren crossed my threshold, I watched her realize just for a second that this room belonged to me, and in my room, blanks do not stay blank for long. Lauren chose the chair closest to the hallway, the one with a clear path to the door, as if she liked to feel in control of exits. Ethan sat across from me, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes moving between us the way they always did when he sensed weather coming. Diane stayed in my living room with a magazine open on her lap, close enough to hear but far enough to seem casual, exactly as planned. I poured coffee into 3 mugs and slid the plate of cinnamon rolls to the center of the table. "Eat," I told Ethan gently, because I did not want him running on nerves. Lauren did not touch her mug. She only kept her fingers around it, warming her hands like she was performing vulnerability. "Thank you for having us," she said, voice soft, polite, almost tender. "We just want to clear the air." I nodded. "So do I said. I waited 1 beat longer than usual, letting silence do what it does best. Make people feel it. Lauren smiled and tilted her head. "I know Sunday was awkward," she began. "But you have to understand emotions are high right now. We are thinking about the future." "The future," I repeated, calm. "That is a big word." Ethan cleared his throat. "Mom, Lauren is just saying we should plan. Like if something happens, we do not want you alone with everything," he said, and the sentence landed with all the careful phrasing Lauren had fed him. Alone. Everything. The 2 most useful words when you want someone to hand over control. I reached for my napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth, buying time like a woman who had learned patience in 1,000 small family storms. "I agree with planning," I said. "That is why I reviewed my documents this week." Lauren's eyes sharpened for half a second, before she softened them again. "Oh, you did," she said, too bright. "That is wonderful. We were going to help you with that. I even found a service that can send a notary to your house. It is so much easier." "Yes," I said, and I let my gaze settle on her the way it had at the dinner table, steady and unreadable. "You mentioned that." She blinked once. Ethan looked surprised. "You talked to Mom about that?" he asked, and Lauren laughed lightly like it was nothing. "Of course. I care," she said. "I just want to make sure everything is secure. Especially with the baby." Ethan's face softened immediately at that word, and I felt my chest tighten again, not with fear, but with the weight of how easily he could be guided. I leaned back slightly, keeping my hands visible on the table, keeping my voice level. "Lauren," I said, "I have been thinking about something you said at dinner." Her smile held, but her shoulders drew in a fraction, the tiniest defensive shift. "What did I say?" she asked, as if she could not imagine anyone remembering her words exactly. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply repeated it, precise and quiet. "You leaned in and whispered, 'I am pregnant with your—'" And then you stopped. Ethan's head snapped toward Lauren. "You said what?" he breathed. Lauren's lips parted, then closed. For a moment, the room felt perfectly still, as if even the tulips in the vase were listening. I watched Lauren decide whether to deny it, minimize it, or weaponize it. She chose the only option she thought would keep control. She gave a small sigh and looked at Ethan as if I had forced her hand. "I did not mean it like that," she said, voice trembling on purpose. I did not know how to say it." Then she looked back at me, eyes shining with a practiced kind of hurt, and she said, "Maggie, you know what I meant. I meant your help, your support, your signature on what needs to be done so our child is protected." And in that sentence she filled the blank herself. For a moment, I let Lauren's words hang in the air exactly the way she had wanted my reaction to hang at that dinner table, heavy and suggestive. Ethan looked stunned, caught between the wife he loved and the mother who raised him, and I could see the old boy in him begging for someone to make it simple. Lauren kept her gaze steady, as if she had just delivered a reasonable request, as if she had not used a whisper and a blank to corner me. I reached for my mug and took one slow sip of coffee, giving myself time to choose calm over emotion, because calm is the one thing manipulators cannot bend. "Thank you for finally finishing your sentence," I said softly, not cruel, just clear. Lauren's mouth tightened. "I did not mean to upset anyone," she replied, and her hand drifted back toward her stomach like a shield. I turned my eyes to Ethan. "Sweetheart, look at me," I said. Ethan did. and his eyes were wet in the way men get when they are trying very hard not to cry. I want you to have a good life, I continued. I want your home to be stable. And if there is a baby, I want that child to be safe and loved. But safety does not come from rushing someone's signature. Safety comes from honesty. Lauren exhaled sharply, like my word had touched a nerve. We are being honest, she insisted. We just want to make sure everything is handled. I nodded once, then reached to the sideboard and brought my folder to the table, placing it down gently like setting a Bible on a pulpit. I opened it and slid one sheet forward, then another, not as threats but as facts. This is my updated paperwork, I said. It has safeguards. It requires independent witnesses. It requires verification. No one will be sending a notary to my house to streamline my life. Ethan stared at the pages, then looked at Lauren. Lauren, why would you need Mom's signature for our child? He asked, and his voice was small, wounded by the realization that something had been handled without him understanding it. Lauren's smile flickered, just a flash, and in that flash I saw the truth. She had expected him to be a doorway, not a person. It is not like that, she said quickly. It is just responsible planning. Responsible planning does not start with a whisper, I replied. My tone stayed gentle but my words did not move. The room went quiet again, and Diane turned a page in her magazine without looking up, a reminder that this was not just my word against Lauren's. Ethan's shoulders sagged, and he rubbed his forehead the way he did when he was overwhelmed as a teenager. Mom, he said, I am sorry. I did not know. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. I know you did not, I said. That is why I am not here to punish you. I am here to protect what we have left. Lauren's eyes hardened, then softened again when she realized hard would not work in my house. So what now? She asked, voice tight. I closed the folder and kept my hand on it. Now we do things the right way, I said. If you need help, you ask plainly. If you want boundaries, you respect mine. And if you ever try to corner me again with fear and blanks, you will find I do not freeze anymore. Ethan squeezed my hand, and it was the smallest gesture, but it felt like a bridge being rebuilt plank by plank. When they left an hour later, Lauren's smile was gone and Ethan hugged me longer than usual at the door. After their car pulled away, I stood in my quiet hallway, the air smelling faintly of cinnamon and coffee, and I realized something that made my eyes sting. I had not saved myself with anger. I had saved myself with dignity. And for the first time in a long time, my home felt like mine again.